Nigger by Dick Gregory with Robert Lipsight. Copyright 1964 by Dick Gregory. Dear Mama, wherever you are, if you ever hear the word nigger again, remember they are advertising my book. Richard Claxton Gregory was born on Columbus Day, 1932. A welfare case. You've seen him on every street corner in America. You knew he had rhythm by the way he snapped his cloth while he shined your shoes. Happy little black boy, the way he grinned and picked your quarter out of the air. Then he ran off and bought himself a Twinkie cupcake, a bottle of Pepsi Cola, and a pocket full of caramels. You didn't know that was his dinner, and you never followed him home. Not poor, just broke. Chapter 1. It's a sad and beautiful feeling to walk home slow on Christmas Eve after you've been out hustling all day, shining shoes in the white taverns and going to the store for the neighbors and buying and stealing presents from the 10-cent store. And now it's dark and still along the street, and your feet feel warm and sweaty inside your tennis sneakers, even if the wind finds the holes in your mittens. The electric Santa Clauses wink at you from windows. You stop off at your best friend's house and look at his tree and give him a ballpoint pen with his name on it. You reach into your shopping bag and give something to everybody there, even the ones you don't know. It doesn't matter that they don't have anything for you, because it feels so good to be in a warm, happy place where grown-ups are laughing. There are daddies around. Your best friend's so happy and excited, standing there trying on all his new clothes. As you walk down the stairs, you hear his mother say, "Boo, you forgot to say goodbye to Richard. Say goodbye to Richard, Boo, and wish him a..." Then you're out on the street again, and some of the lights have gone out. You take the long way home, and Mr. Ben, the grocer, says, "Merry Christmas, Richard." And you give him a present out of the shopping bag, and you smile at a wino and give him a nickel. And you even wave at Grimes, the mean cop. It's a good feeling. You don't want to get home too fast. And then you hit North Taylor, your street, and something catches your eye, and you lift your head up, and it's there in your window. Can't believe it. You start running, and the only thing in the whole world you're mad about is that you can't run fast enough. For the first time in a long while, the cracked orange door says, "Come on in, little man. You're home now." And there's a wreath and lights in the window, and a tree in the kitchen near the coal closet, and you hug your mama, her face hot from the stove. "Oh, Mama, I'm so glad you did it like this, because ours is new, just for us. Everybody else's tree been up all week long for other people to see, and Mama, ours is up just for us. Mama, oh Mama, you did it again." My beautiful mama smiled at me like Miss America, and my brothers and sisters danced around that little kitchen with the round wooden table and the orange crate chairs. "Go get the vanilla, Richard," said Mama. "Presley, peel some sweet potatoes. Go get the bread out of the oven, Dolores. You get away from that duckling, Garland. Ronald, oh Ronald, you be good now. Stand over there with Pauline. Oh Richard, my little man, did you see the ham Miss White from the eat shop sent by? And the bag of nuts from Mr. Myers? And the turkey from Miss King? And wouldn't you know, Mr. Ben, he..." "Hey, Mama, I know some rich people don't got this much. A ham and a turkey, Mama?" "The Lord, He's always looking out for my boys, Richard. And this ain't all. The white folks be by here tomorrow to bring us more things." Mama was so happy that Christmas. All the food folks bought us, and Mr. Ben giving us more credit, and Mama even talked the electric man into turning the lights on again. Hey Mama, look here, got a present for Daddy, a cigarette lighter. Mama, there's even a place to scratch a name on it. What you scratch on it, Richard? Big Press or Daddy? Nothing, Mama. Might have to give Daddy's present to old Mr. White from the eat shop again. She turned away, and when she turned back her eyes were wet. Then she smiled her Miss America smile and grabbed my shoulder. Richard, my little man, if I show you something, you won't tell nobody, will you? What is it, Mama? I got something for you. Oh, Mama, you forgot everything's under the tree. There is something special just for you, Richard. Thanks, Mama. Oh, thanks. How do you know I wanted a wallet, Mama? A real wallet like men have. Mama always gave each of us something special like that. Something personal that wasn't under the tree. Something we weren't supposed to tell the other kids about. It always came out, though. Garland and I'd be fighting, and one of us would say, Mama likes me better than you, look what she gave me. And we both found out the other got a secret present too. But I loved that wallet. First thing I did was fill out the address card. If I got hit by a car, someone would know who I am. Then I put my dollars in it. Just like men do. Ran outside that night and got on the streetcar and pulled out my wallet and handed the conductor $1. Got anything smaller, boy? Sure, mister, I said, and I pulled out my wallet again and took a dime out of the coin purse and snapped it shut and put the $1 back in the long pocket and closed the wallet and slipped it into my back pocket. Did the same thing on the way back home. Did we eat that night? It seemed like all the days we went without food, no bread for the bologna and no bologna for the bread. All the times in the summer when there was no sugar for the Kool-Aid and no lemon for the lemonade and no ice at all were wiped away. Man, we're all right. After dinner, I went out the back door and looked at the sky and told God how nobody ever ate like we ate that night. Macaroni and cheese and ham and turkey and the old ducklings cooking in the oven for tomorrow. There's even whiskey, Mama said, for people who come by. Thanks, God. Mama's so happy, and even the rats and roaches didn't come out tonight, and the wind isn't blowing through the cracks. How do you know I wanted a wallet, God? I wonder if all the rich people who get mink coats and electric trains got the one little thing nobody knew they wanted. You know, God, I'm kinda glad you were born in a manger. I wonder, God, if they had let Mary in the first place, she stopped that. Would you have remembered tonight? Oh, God, I'm scared. I wish I could die right now with the feeling I have, because I know Mama's going to make me mad, and I'm going to make her mad, and me and Presley gonna fight. Richard, you get in here and put your coat on. Get in here or I'll whip you. See what I mean? God, there she goes already, and I'm not even cold. I'm all wrapped up in you. What's wrong, Richard? Why you look so strange? You wouldn't understand, Mama. I would, Richard, you tell me. Well, I came out to pray, Mama, way out here so they wouldn't hear me and laugh at me and call me a sissy. God's a good God, ain't he, Mama? Yes, Richard. Mama, if I tell you something, would you laugh at me? Would you say I'm crazy? Would you say I was lying, Mama? What is it, Richard? I heard him talk to me, Mama. She put her arm around my shoulders and pulled me against her. He talks to people, Richard. Some people that are real special and good like you. Do me a favor, Richard. Sure, Mama. Next time you talk to him, ask him to send Daddy home. Let me stay up and look out the window with you, Mama. Everybody's in bed, Richard. All my life, Mama, I wanted to stay up with you on Christmas Eve and look out that window with you, Mama. I won't laugh at you." "What you mean, Richard?" "You're waiting on him, ain't you?" "I know, Mama. Every Christmas Eve you take a bath and put on that perfume and those clothes from the rich white folks and get down there on your knees in front of that window looking for Daddy." "Richard, you better get on to bed." "I know, Mama, that whiskey ain't for people coming by. That's for Daddy." "Richard, you go on to bed, and when he gets here, I'll wake you up." "No, Mama, I want to sit up with you, Mama." "Yes, Richard, I should have got a present for Mr. White, 'cause I know Daddy's coming to get his this year." There were a lot of things I wanted to tell Mama that night while we sat and waited for Daddy, while we prayed on our knees and dozed and hugged each other against the cold and jumped up like jacks every time we heard a noise on the street. But I never did. Sometimes I think she knew anyway. I wanted to say to her, "Mama, you remember that day I came home and told you I was at Dr. Jackson's house, and how he liked me, Mama, and told me I'd be a good doctor? How he's going to help me learn to read, and how he told me when it gets too cold to study in my house, and I could come by his house. Remember that, Mama?" It was a lie. I played all that day in a vacant lot. I guess she knew. She never pressed me for names when I told her about all the people who liked me, all the people I created in my mind, people to help poor folks. I couldn't believe God had made a world and hadn't put none of those people in it. I made up a school teacher that loved me, that taught me to read, a teacher that didn't put me in the idiot seat or talk about you and your kind. She didn't yell at me when I came to school with my homework all wrinkled and damp. She understood when I told her it was too cold to study in the kitchen, so I did my homework under the covers with a flashlight. Then I fell asleep, and one of the other 5 kids in bed must have peed on it. I'd go out and sweat and make $5, and I'd come home and say, "Mama, Mr. Green told me to bring this to you. Told me he liked you. Told me he wished he could raise his kids the way you're raising us." That wasn't true, Mama. Remember all those birthday parties I went to, Mama? Used to steal things from the 10-cent store and give the best presents. I'd come home and tell you how we played pillow kiss and post office and pin the tail on the donkey, and how everybody liked me. That was a lie, Mama. One girl cried and ran away when she threw the pillow and it hit me. She opened her eyes and saw she was supposed to kiss me, and she cried and ran away. And on my birthday, Mama, when I came home with that shopping bag full of presents and told you the kids in my class loved me so much they all got me things, that wasn't true. I stole all those little things from the 10-cent store and wrapped them up and put a different kid's name on each one. "Oh, Richard, if he don't show up this time." "He's coming, Mama. It's like you said. He got held up in traffic. The trains were full." "You know, Richard, your daddy's a cook. He has to work on Christmas." "He'll be here, Mama. You go put those clothes back on." Remember when those people came by and told you how dirty we were? How they didn't want us playing with their kids or coming into their houses? They said we smelled so bad. I was 6 then, and Presley was almost 8. You cried all night, Mama, and then you told us to stay home until you could get us some new clothes. And you went and hid all the clothes we had. Mama, it was summertime, and we couldn't just lay there crying and watching out the window at the kids play running tag and rip and run, and get called in for their naps, and get called in for their dinners. And we looked all over for our clothes, down in the basement, in the coal closet, under the stove, and we couldn't find them. And then we went through your things, Mama, and put on the dresses you never wore, the dresses the rich white folks gave you, and then we went outside to play. The people laughed at us when we went outside in your dresses, pointed and slapped their legs. We never played so good as we played that summer, with all people watching. When we came off the porch, those Negro doctors and lawyers and teachers waiting to get into White's Eat Shop across the street would nudge each other and turn their heads. And when the street car stopped on the corner right in front of our house, the people would lean out the windows and stare. Presley and I would wave at them. We did it all that summer, and after a while nobody bothered us. Everybody got to know that the Gregory boys didn't have clothes, so they wore their mother's dresses. We just made sure we were home before you got there, Mama. How do I look, Richard? You look okay, Mama. These are the best pair of shoes I got. Miss Wallace gave me them, but they're summer shoes. What you mean, summer shoes? Those are the black and white ones I like so much, the ones you never wear. I didn't know they were summer shoes. You never see folks wear white shoes in the wintertime? People dye them, Mama. I'll dye them for you, so you can put them on and Daddy can see you. Oh, Richard, there won't be time. They got to dry. Don't worry, Mama. You burn the dye and it dries right while you wear it. I've dyed a lot of shoes, Mama, down on my hands and knees in the taverns. Dyeing shoes and shining shoes. I never told you too much about the things I did and the things I saw, Mama. Remember the time I came home with my teeth knocked in and my lip all cut? Told you I tripped downstairs. Mama, I got kicked right in the face. It was Saturday afternoon, my big hustling day. I was 10, but I looked like I was 7. There were a lot of people in the tavern drinking beer, and I was shining this white woman's shoes. They were white and brown shoes, summer shoes. The men sitting at the bar were laughing. Hey, Flo, gonna take that little monkey home with you, change your luck? She started laughing. Maybe I will. Heard these little coons are hung like horses. I'm getting tired of you worms. Little monkey's got a tail, Flo. Swing from limb to limb. White and brown shoes. I didn't want to get the brown polish on the white part, so I put my other hand on the back of the white woman's leg to steady myself. He's got a tail all right. One of you boys can warm me up, but I'm going to get me a black buck to do me right. One of the white men, a man who wasn't laughing, jumped off his bar stool. Get your dirty black hands off that white lady, you nigger bastard. He kicked me right in the mouth. One of the men who had been laughing came off his stool and grabbed the man who kicked me. For Christ's sake, he's just a little kid. Mind your goddamn business. Whoop, the fight was on. The bartender jumped over the bar and grabbed me with one hand and my shoe shine box with the other. Sorry, boy, it's not your fault, but I can't have you around. Out on the sidewalk, he gave me a $5 bill. When I saw all the blood and pieces of tooth on my shirt, I got scared. Mama would be real angry, so I went over to Boo's house and spent the night. I told Boo if I could get kicked in the mouth a couple of more times today and get $5 each time, man, I'd be all right. What time is it, Mama? 4 o'clock, Richard. I guess I didn't have time to burn them, did I? The tavern isn't so bad, Mama. No kid ever runs up and laughs at me because I'm shining shoes, but they sure remind me I'm on relief. And there's another reason I won't quit working in taverns, Mama. In the wintertime, it's warmer in there, and in the summertime, it's cooler than our house. And even though men spit in my face and kick me in the mouth, Mama, every so often somebody rubs my head and calls me son. Why do you believe he's coming, Richard? Oh, Mama, I talked to that man in the backyard. I know he's coming. Go on to bed, Richard. No, Mama, I'll wait here with you. If I lay over there in the chair, when he comes, will you wake me up?" "Sure I will, Richard. Now get some sleep." "Okay, Mama." So many things I wanted to tell you that night, Mama. There was a little girl used to wave to me when I cut through the alley to get on Taylor. A clean little girl who used to sneak a piece of cake off her table and give it to me. A piece of cake and a glass of Kool-Aid. After a while, I'd finish up my paper route early just to come back and wave at her. After dinner, her mama and daddy would go up to the front room to sit around and leave her in the back to do the dishes all alone. I started to help her wash the dishes. I'd creep up in the back porch and she'd let me in and say, "Shh, nobody knows you're here." It was like playing house. I'd just come up and stand there at the sink with her every night and help her with the dishes. Then one time her father came back to the kitchen. He grabbed me and shook me and told me how I broke into his house because his daughter wouldn't let no dirty street kid in. She was crying, scared to death, and she said, "I let him in, Daddy. I let him in. He's my friend." "No, sir, she's lying," I said. "I make her bring me food out, and I make her let me in." He slapped me. He slapped me until I fell down, and when she grabbed onto his arm, crying and screaming to make him stop, he kicked me out of the door to the back porch. He started to choke me. Then he stopped. "Why you grinning at me like that, you little bastard?" "Last week, when you woke up drunk on this here porch, that was me brought you home. Found you on Sarah Street and brought you home and was so proud leading your black ass down the street 'cause you acted just like my daddy would. Come out of your drunk every now and then swinging and fighting. I had to run and duck. People see you and want to jump on you. But I tell them, that's my daddy, he's alright. Leave him alone, that's my daddy." He let me go and he backed away and there was a funny look on his face. He started sweating and chewing on his lip and looked around to see if anybody heard what I had said. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. He gave me $1. I threw it back at him. I reached into my own hip pocket and pulled out $1. My dollar was bigger than his because nobody knew I had mine, and then I walked away. God, my little Richard's asleep now, and I have to talk to you. I always made a big mistake, God. I sit here every Christmas, times in the summer too, and pray for his daddy, and never pray for other kids' daddies. Send them theirs first, and then if you're not too weary, O Lord, send Big Prez home. But when you send him, God, don't send him for me. Send him 'cause the boys need him. God, my mama cried herself to sleep, so I'm asking you to send Daddy home right away. God, wherever he is, let him knock on that door. I'll wait up for him. God, just let him please knock on that door. Mama, I love those firemen in St. Louis, so big and tall and strong, rushing out to save people. Negro firemen and white firemen, no difference. They'd rush out and never ask whose house it was, how much money he had, if he was on relief. I'd stand on the corner where they had to pass, and I'd wave to them, and sometimes they'd wave back. Sometimes I thought they went out of their way to pass that corner, just so they could wave to me. Then I'd follow them to the fire, and stand there and pray they would put it out fast so none of them would get hurt. I used to count every fireman that went up the ladder and count them as they came back down. Once I saw them use the net to save somebody, and they didn't act like they were doing anybody a favor. I'd see them standing around in their uniforms like they all belonged to the same family and talk about fires. At the big fires, when the Red Cross came, they'd drink coffee and bite into sandwiches. It's a beautiful thing to watch a man who really deserves the food he eats. One time, I bought an old raincoat with hooks instead of buttons, and a pair of old hip boots. I hid them in the cellar. Nobody knew I had them. Whenever I wanted to feel good, I put them on and walk around the cellar, pretending I was putting out fires, running up ladders to save people, catching people in my net. Then I'd take them off and walk over to the firehouse and watch them drill and clean the engine and roll up the hose. I'd walk right up to a fireman and say, "Excuse me, mister, but I sure like you all." He'd turn around and say something nice to me. Sometimes before I knew better, I used to think my daddy was a fireman somewhere, saving people and saying nice things to kids. "Mama, Mama, wake up, wake up. Mama, did you hear it? Did you hear it? Somebody's knocking on the door." There was a neighbor woman standing at the door when I opened it. "Let me speak to your mother, Richard." I left the room like I was supposed to when a grown person came in, but I listened. "He's here, Lucille. Big Prez been down my house all night, scared to come home, 'cause he ain't got nothing for the kids but some money. He just got in this evening. Been over my place crying, Lucille, 'cause he went and gambled and won, and when he finished winning, all the stores was closed. I ran right in, and Mama grabbed me and hugged me. 'I told you, Mama. Didn't I tell you he was coming? Go get him. Mama, go and tell him we got everything we want.' I ran back and woke up the kids. 'Daddy's home! Daddy's home!' And they tumbled out of bed, all 5 of them rolling and fighting their way out of the blankets, caught up in the sheet and scrambling around for the socks they lost under the covers and bumping into each other, and in such a hurry they got legs and arms all mixed up. But nobody was mad at all. We all ran into the kitchen and jumped up and down while Mama got dressed again, put on the fanciest of the clothes the white folks gave her, clothes she never wore, and fixed her hair and put on lipstick and perfume. 'You don't need that stuff, Mama. Just go get Daddy and bring him home.' After Mama left, we quieted down. We sat in the front room by the window and we waited. We hadn't seen him much in 5 years. We waited a long time because Mama hadn't seen him much in 5 years either. 'Aw, he not really here,' said Dolores. She was 12. 'Anyway, I don't want to see him.' 'I want to see him,' said Ronald. He was 7, and he was sitting on the floor, shivering and holding on to Pauline's hand. Pauline was the baby. She was almost 5. 'Oh, man,' said Presley, who was 14. 'I can't wait. He's going to be so clean. A $200 suit on him.' 'Dare anybody he going to be wearing $1,000 suits,' said Garland, who was 9, 'and he'll have a pocket full of money.' 'Yeah, a pocket full of money, but no gifts,' I said. 'He's been busy making money,' said Garland. 'He's a soldier,' said Ronald. 'Mama said he's a cook,' said Dolores. 'Big deal.' 'What's the matter with you? Don't you want to see Daddy?' said Presley. 'Last week I wanted to see him when the rent man was cussing Mama.' 'He's been busy making money,' said Garland. Pauline started to cry, and Ronald leaned over and rocked her in his arms. 'Oh, you be quiet, little rat. Your daddy coming home. He's a soldier.' 'He's a cook,' said Dolores, pushing Presley a little to look out the window. 'Shut up, girl,' said Presley. 'You remember when Daddy carried that old lady across the street?' 'No.' 'See, you don't know nothing. Man, was he ever big and clean. He got arms so strong, he just picked this old lady right up after she fell off the streetcar and carried her across the street and up to her house. Everybody saw it.' Presley did a lot of talking that night. I was just thinking. I thought about the time that trampy woman came by and shouted at my mama. goddamn husband of yours home? No, he's not, Mama said politely. I just want you to know anytime he ain't at your house or my house, he's at some woman's house. I appreciate you wouldn't come by here talking like this because the kids can hear you. I don't give a damn about your kids. I got some kids for him too. Yeah, I thought Big Press is coming home. All those nights Mama kept the hallway light on after we went to bed. All those nights she listened to the police news on the radio, listening to hear his name. The times the police came by the house to ask if we'd seen him lately. Suddenly a taxi cab pulled up outside the window and we heard the door slam, and a big deep voice like nobody's but my daddy's was saying, "Keep the change, friend." And then all the kids were on their feet and knocking each other down to get to the door, and Ronald dropped Pauline, and everybody was hollering and screaming, and the last thing I heard was my mama's voice saying, "Don't touch his clothes with your dirty hands. Now don't touch his clothes." I slammed the bedroom door and climbed into bed with my sneakers on and cried. I pulled a blanket over my head, but I could hear all right. Man, look at that $1,000 suit. See what I tell you, Presley? Look at Daddy. Hey, Daddy, pick me up after Pauline. Now you get off Big Press. Don't go messing up his clothes with your dirty hands. Lucille, where's Richard? Richard, Big Press is here, come on out. But she was scared to leave him to see if I was okay. When she turned her back, he might walk out again. Look at all that money Daddy got. Bet it's $1 million. Where'd you get all that money, Daddy? I could hear him crackling the money in his hand, and his big deep voice saying, "You been a good girl, Loris, doing like your mama says. You been good. Presley don't want you growing up to be like your daddy now, paying your mama mind and doing your schoolwork. How about you, Garland?" And I lay there and bit the cover and kicked the sheet and cried. Don't want you growing up to be like your daddy now. Is that what he's worried about? I bit the cover until my gums started bleeding, and I didn't stop until my nose was all stuffed up from crying. Don't you worry, Daddy. Don't you worry. After a while, Mama brought him into the bedroom. Big Press, Richard waited up all night for you. He knew you were coming. He brought you something for Christmas, Big Press. You know, he buys you something every Christmas. She pulled on me. She rolled me over. What's wrong with you, Richard? Didn't you hear me call for you? Didn't you hear me say Daddy's home? What are you crying about, Richard? What's wrong with you? She didn't tell him what was wrong. No, you got to treat strangers with respect. Big Press, he's just jealous. He's just jealous 'cause you didn't pick him up like you picked up the others. I lay in bed and I looked up at the man, and he was 10 feet tall. Tallest man I ever saw. He was clean and he was strong, and he was healthy. He sat down on the bed next to me. Don't you sit on that dirty bed, Big Press, said Mama, and she brushed off his suit and got one of the silk tablecloths the white folks had given her, which we never used. She put the tablecloth on top of the sheet. Yeah, the one sheet that stayed on the bed for 6 months. She didn't want Big Press to get his suit dirty. I brought you some money, Richard. Don't want it, Daddy. Got more for you than I got for the others. Still don't want it. I'm your daddy, boy. Don't you want to see me? I see you every time I see Mama on her knees in front of the window crying and praying you come. You ought to thank me 'cause I brought you here. Yeah, thank me you never get sick, 'cause every night I say my prayers. I say bless him wherever he is. Richard, I'm going to stay home with you this time. If you want me, I'll stay home. You want me to stay, Richard? I didn't say anything. I'll get a job. Your mama won't have to work. You want me, Richard? I looked at him, but I didn't say anything. I guess he meant what he said. The moment he said it anyway. And I lay there and I was thinking, if you stay, old man, I'll leave. I don't need you. Daddy, not now. I needed you when the boys chased me home, when the man cheated me out of my paper money. Needed you every time Boo's daddy came home at 7 o'clock. Seal, what's wrong with this boy? Don't you worry about him, Big Prez. He's crazy. That got me mad, Mama forgetting all her love for me to pacify him. Yeah, he's crazy. Hey, Seal, you got a drink around the house? She brought out the whiskey. He drank it right out of the bottle. I got dressed that day and I left the house to play, but I ducked back every half hour to see if he was still there. Once I slipped Boo in to let him peep. That's my daddy, Boo. My daddy's rich too, man. Pocket full of money. Your daddy ain't got no money. You all on relief. Come here, Boo. Let me show you something. I walked up to my daddy and looked at him. It was the first time I walked in and said anything to him. I didn't ask him, I told him. Give Boo $5, Daddy. When he reached in and pulled out that pocket full of money, Boo's eyes popped out. He hadn't ever seen that much money in his life. Looked like he had all the money in the world. He looked so fine, fumbling through those 20s and 5s and 10s, and I wondered if it was enough to go over to Mr. Benz and wipe out the back bill and put a little on the front bill. You got a good daddy, said Boo. I kept slipping back all that day, peeping in to make sure he was still there. Once I thought I almost caught him leaving, all dressed with his brown bag in his hand. But when he saw me, he put it down. I'd slip in, and I'd hear him telling Mama all the things he was going to do for her. Stay home, get a job, get off relief, give up other women, take Mama to all the nightclubs. She wouldn't have to work for the white folks no more. Told you about working so hard for them white folks, he say. Don't want my kids left in this house all by themselves. She cried. You mean it? Press, you really mean it? Yeah, Seal. She got up off her orange crate chair and put her hands on his face and kissed him. I walked right in then. Get your goddamn hands off my mama. He beat me, pulled off his belt and beat me across my backside. Mama held me on her lap while he beat me. Ah, that's a hell of a man there, that Richard. I beat his ass good. Seal, and he don't even cry. He had little men and he didn't even know it. Every time he hit me, I couldn't cry from almost wanting to laugh. I know, old man, couple of days from now you'll be too far away for that belt to reach me. Mama made me go to bed and she whispered, please treat your daddy nice. For me. Please do it for me. I'm the cause of his being here, Mama. I'm the one that asked the man out back. I prayed for him. That's right, Richard. That night he beat her. He beat her all through the house, every room, swinging his belt and whooping her with his hand and cussing her and kicking her and knocking her down and telling her about his women. Think you're so goddamn good, bitch? Said my daddy, cracking my mama across her back with his belt. She whimpered and fell against a little table, knocking over a lamp from the white folks. She bent over to pick up the lamp, and Big Prez kicked her in the backside, and she fell forward on the linoleum floor. She lay there, her face pressed against the linoleum, sobbing. I don't even feel right walking down the street with you, he said, kicking her in the side with his foot. Walk down the street, everybody wants to run up, say hello to you. They look at me like I was dirt. He grabbed her hair and pulled her up to her knees. Mama looked up at him, tears running down her cheek. Swat! Right across her face. I got bitches, women like you never seen, proud to walk down the street with Big Prez. Whack! Mama fell down on her face again. Get on your feet, bitch. Mama got up slowly. Whack! Mama spun across the front room, back toward the kitchen, like a drunk. Whack! Big Prez had the belt out again, and now he drove her in front of him, around the kitchen table, Mama stumbling over the chairs and the orange crates. Big Prez kicking them out of his way. Whack! Back into the front room, Mama bounced against a soft chair and then against a wall. And what the hell you taught Richard, bitch? Hell, whatever you taught him, you ain't gonna turn them all against their daddy? She never said a word, just crying, sobbing, trying to stay on her feet, trying not to get hit too hard, and never really ducking his hand or his belt. She'd see it coming and close her eyes and put her hands up, but she never tried to get out of the way. The kids were crying and hollering, and Ronald and Pauline were hugging each other, and Dolores was hiding her face in her hands. Garland and Presley were scared to death. I watched him knock her down and cuss her, and he was saying the things I wanted to say when she forgot her love for me and told him I was crazy. He left her on the floor, dirty and crying, came over and whooped me across my face so hard that when I knocked into the wall, the pictures fell right off their hooks. One was a picture of Jesus, and the other was a piece of wood with the 10 Commandments. And then they were in the kitchen, and Big Prez was crying and kissing my mama and saying he was sorry and how he was going to take care of us and give up his women and get a job. And Mama kept saying, "No, Big Prez, it's all my fault. It's all my fault. I shouldn't talk like that. It'll be time to get off relief when you're home a while and get a chance to rest up." I got up off the floor and I walked into that kitchen. Big Prez was sitting at the table with his face in his hands, and Mama was standing over him, stroking his head. They both were crying. I took down the butcher knife off the wall, the big one with the black handle, and swung at his head. Seen plenty of people swing knives in the taverns, and I knew how to cut. Swung right at his head. Everything I had, I swung for every kid in the whole world who hated his no-good daddy. Mama grabbed my wrist with both her hands and twisted the knife out of my hand. Big Prez looked up real slow. I guess it's a hell of a thing for a man to look up into his own son's eyes and see murder. "I'll leave now, Seal," he said very softly. "You should have let him hit me. Should have let him kill me. I never was any good. Never treated you or him right. I need to be dead." He got up. "Don't beat Richard, Seal. Don't beat him. I know what I've done." Mama grabbed Big Prez's leg and he kicked her away. He turned and walked out the door. My mama tried to hold the door open while he closed it behind him. "No, Big Prez, he didn't mean nothing. Richard's crazy, you know that." He turned and kicked her foot out of the door and slammed it shut. My mama fell down and slid across the floor, holding the doorknob in her hand. "Don't leave, Daddy! Don't leave, Daddy!" The kids were screaming. I followed him out the door and down the street. He didn't see me. His head was down, and he walked like the greatest crime in the world had just been committed against him. His head didn't come up again until he walked into a tavern. I walked in behind him and stood near the door where he couldn't see me. He walked right up to a woman sitting at the bar. She was smoking a cigarette and tapping her high heels against the rail. "Where you been, Big Prez?" I've been waiting on you for hours. I had to beat that bitch's ass for bad-mouthing you, Molly. But I got a little tough man there, Richard. You should see that little man. Beat his ass, he didn't even cry. I've been waiting all day, Big Prez. Don't you start telling me about some little bastard you got. Don't even know if it's yours or the... Watch your mouth, Molly. My seal's a good woman. No loose piece of trim like you. Sure, who you think buys the bread when you're... He knocked that bitch right off the stool. He swung that big hand of his, and her cigarette went one way and her shoes came off, and she went face first on the floor. He stomped that woman like no other man in the world. I got to see my daddy at his best that night. Two men stood up from tables and started toward Big Prez. He threw back his head and he laughed, and he stood over that bitch, and his hand came out of his pocket with a razor in it. Dare any dirty motherfucker in this place to come and stop me from stomping this bitch here? Nobody moved. He walked out of there 10 feet tall. My daddy. I walked over to the woman on the floor and helped her up. She shook me away. I'm real sorry, ma'am. She spat in my face. She didn't know I was Big Prez's boy. I watched him walk down the street, head up high, hands swinging loose. Big Prez, a real Capone with the whores and the bitches. Heard, I love you from some broad off the street, but never from his own kids. And that's worth all the sevens falling on all the craps all over the world. He missed it. Missed seeing his kids grow up. Missed having his kids crawl into bed with him and lie down and go to sleep because daddy's sleeping. He missed what I have now. Feeling a little girl put a finger in my mouth, knowing that daddy will never bite hard. Hearing a little kid say, "Throw me up in the air, daddy." Sure that daddy would catch her. Big Prez had to be a lonely man. There must have been times he woke up in a lonely bed and wanted to give every whore he ever had, every 7, every 11 he ever threw, every wild time he ever had, just to go all the way back and have one of his kids walk up to him and say, "Daddy, I love you." There must have been times like that, because I would turn in all the Dick Gregorys in the world, and all the nightclubs, and all the money, just to go back to those days and find a daddy there. When you have a good mother and no father, God kind of sits in. It's not enough, but it helps. But I got tired of hearing Mama say, "God, fix it so I can pay the rent. God, fix it so the lights will be turned on. God, fix it so the pot is full." I kind of felt it really wasn't his job. And it's a hell of a thing when you're growing up and you're out on the street and you kind of hedge up to a man so he can rub your head and call you son. It's a hell of a thing to hear a man say, "I wish my boys were more like the Gregory boys." If Big Prez could only know how people admired the Gregory boys. Well, Big Prez walked away and left us to face the cold winters, the hot summers, the Easters with nothing new, the picnics with nothing in the basket. I wonder if it ever dawned on him that he fixed it so we couldn't even go to church one Sunday every year. Father's Day. I should never have swung at him with that knife. I should have fallen on my knees and cried for him. No kid in the world, no woman in the world should ever raise a hand against a no-good daddy. That's already been taken care of. A man who destroys his own home shall inherit the wind. When I got back home that night, the knob was back on the door, and the light was on in the hallway. She was sitting up that night, looking out the window. Mama sat like that for the next 3 or 4 months, looking out the window, dozing in her chair, listening to the police news. Then she'd go to work without having been to bed. Sometimes I'd stay up with her, listen to the radio with her, look out the window with her. I tried to make her believe I didn't know she was waiting on him. Chapter 2. Like a lot of Negro kids, we never would have made it without our mama. When there was no fat back to go with the beans, no socks to go with the shoes, no hope to go with tomorrow, she'd smile and say, "We ain't poor, we just broke." Poor is a state of mind you never grow out of, but being broke is just a temporary condition. She always had a big smile, even when her legs and feet swelled from high blood pressure and she collapsed across the table with sugar diabetes. You have to smile 24 hours a day, Mama would say. If you walk through life showing the aggravation you've gone through, people will feel sorry for you and they'll never respect you. She taught us that man has two ways out in life, laughing or crying. There's more hope in laughing. A man can fall down the stairs and lie there in such pain and horror that his own wife will collapse and faint at the sight. But if he can just hold back his pain for a minute, she might be able to collect herself and call the doctor. It might mean the difference between his living to laugh again or dying there on the spot. So you laugh, so you smile. Once a month, the big gray relief truck would pull up in front of our house and Mama would flash that big smile and stretch out her hands. Who else you know in the neighborhood gets this kind of service? And we could all feel proud when the neighbors, folks who weren't on relief, folks who had daddies in their homes, would come by the back porch for some of those 100 pounds of potatoes, for some sugar and flour and salty fish. We stand out there on the back porch and hand out the food like we were in charge of helping poor people, and then we'd take the food they brought us in return. And Mama came home one hot summer day and found we'd been evicted, thrown out into the streetcar zone with all our orange crate chairs and second-hand lamps. She flashed that big smile and dried our tears and bought some penny Kool-Aid. We stood out there and sold drinks to thirsty people coming off the streetcar, and we thought nobody knew we were kicked out. Figured they thought we wanted to be there. And Mama went off to talk to the landlord into letting us back in on credit. But I wonder about my mama sometimes, and all the other Negro mothers who got up at 6 a.m. to go to the white man's house with sacks over their shoes because it was so wet and cold. I wonder how they made it. They worked very hard for the man. They made his breakfast, and they scrubbed his floors, and they diapered his babies. They didn't have too much time for us. I wonder about my mama, who walked out of a white man's clean house at midnight and came back to her own where the lights had been out for 3 months, and the pipes were frozen, and the wind came in through the cracks. She'd have to make deals with the rats, leave some food out for them so they wouldn't gnaw on the doors or bite the babies. The roaches, they were just like part of the family. I wonder how she felt telling those white kids she took care of to brush their teeth after they ate, to wash their hands after they peed. She could never tell her own kids because there wasn't soap or water back home. I wonder how my mama felt when we came home from school with a list of vitamins and pills and cod liver oils the school nurse said we had to have. Mama would cry all night and then go out and spend most of the rent money for pills. A week later, the white man would come for his $18 rent, and Mama would plead with him to wait until tomorrow. She had lost her pocketbook. The relief check was coming. The white folks had some money for her. Tomorrow. I'd be hiding in the cold closet, because there was only supposed to be 2 kids in the flat, and I could hear the rent man curse my mama and call her a liar. And when he finally went away, Mama put the sacks on her shoes and went off to the rich white folks' house to dress the rich white kids so their mother could take them to a special baby doctor. Mama had to take us to Homer G. Phillips, the free hospital, the city hospital for Negroes. We stand on the line and wait for hours, smiling and Uncle Tomming every time a doctor or a nurse passed by. We feel good when one of them smiled back and didn't look at us as though we were dirty and had no right coming down there. All the doctors and nurses at Homer G. Phillips were Negro too. I remember one time when the doctor in white walked up and said, "What's wrong with him?" as if he didn't believe that anything was. Mama looked at me and looked at him and shook her head. "I sure don't know, doctor." But he cried all night long, held his stomach. "Bring him in and get his damn clothes off." I was so mad the way he was talking to my mama that I bit down too hard on the thermometer. It broke in my mouth. The doctor slapped me across my face. "Both of you go back, stand in line, and wait your turn." My mama had to say, "I'm sorry, doctor," and go to the back of the line. She had 5 other kids at home, and she never knew when she'd have to bring another down to the city hospital. And those rich white folks Mama was so proud of, she'd sit around with the other women and talk about how good their white folks were. They lie about how rich they were, what nice parties they gave, what good clothes they wore, and how they were going to be remembered in their white folks' wills. The next morning, the white lady would say, "We're going on vacation for 2 months, Lucille. We won't be needing you until we get back." Damn, 2-month vacation without pay. I wonder how my mama stayed so good and beautiful in her soul when she worked 7 days a week on swollen legs and feet. How she kept teaching us to smile and laugh when the house was dark and cold. And she never knew when one of her hungry kids was going to ask about Daddy. I wonder how she kept from teaching us hate when the social worker came around. She was a nasty bitch with the pinched face who said, "We have reason to suspect you are working, Miss Gregory, and you can be sure I'm going to check on you. We don't stand for welfare cheaters." Mama, a welfare cheater? A criminal who couldn't stand to see her kids go hungry or grow up in slums and end up mugging people in dark corners. I guess the system didn't want her to get off relief, the way it kept sending social workers around to be sure Mama wasn't trying to make things better. I remember how that social worker would poke around the house, wrinkling her nose at the coal dust on the chilly linoleum floor, shaking her head at the bugs crawling over the dirty dishes in the sink. My mama would have to stand there and make like she was too lazy to keep her own house clean. She could never let on that she spent all day cleaning another woman's house for $2 and car fare. She would have to follow the nasty bitch around those drafty 3 rooms, keeping her fingers crossed that the telephone hidden in the closet wouldn't ring. Welfare cases weren't supposed to have telephones. But Mama figured that someday the Gregory kids were going to get off North Taylor Street and into a world where they would have to compete with kids who grew up with telephones in their houses. She didn't want us to be at a disadvantage. She couldn't explain that to the social worker, and she couldn't explain that while she was out spoon-feeding somebody else's kids, she was worrying about her own kids. That she could rest her mind by picking up the telephone and calling us to find out if we had bread for our bologna or bologna for our bread. To see if any of us had gotten run over by the streetcar while we played in the gutter. To make sure the house hadn't burned down from the papers and magazines we stuffed in the stove when the coal ran out. But sometimes, when she called, there would be no answer. Home was a place to be only when all other places were closed. I never learned hate at home or shame. I had to go to school for that. I was about 7 years old when I got my first big lesson. I was in love with a little girl named Helen Tucker, a light-complected little girl with pigtails and nice manners. She was always clean and she was smart in school. I think I went to school then mostly to look at her. I brushed my hair and even got me a little old handkerchief. It was a lady's handkerchief, but I didn't want Helen to see me wipe my nose on my hand. The pipes were frozen again. There was no water in the house, but I washed my socks and my shirt every night. I'd get a pot and go over to Mr. Ben's grocery store and stick my pot down into his soda machine, scoop out some chopped ice. By evening, the ice melted to water for washing. I got sick a lot that winter because the fire would go out at night before the clothes were dry. In the morning, I put them on, wet or dry, because they were the only clothes I had. Everybody got a Helen Tucker, a symbol of everything you want. I loved her for her goodness, her cleanliness, her popularity. She walked down my street and my brothers and sisters would yell, "Here comes Helen," and I rubbed my tennis sneakers on the back of my pants and wished my hair wasn't so nappy and the white folks' shirt fit me better. I'd run out on the street. If I knew my place and didn't come too close, she'd wink at me and say hello. That was a good feeling. Sometimes I followed her all the way home and shoveled the snow off her walk and tried to make friends with her mama and her aunts. I dropped money on her stoop late at night on my way back from shining shoes in the taverns. And she had a daddy, and he had a good job. He was a paper hanger. I guess I would have gotten over Helen by summertime, but something happened in that classroom that made her face hang in front of me for the next 22 years. When I played the drums in high school, it was for Helen. And when I broke track records in college, it was for Helen. And when I started standing behind microphones and heard applause, I wished Helen could hear it too. It wasn't until I was 29 years old and married and making money that I finally got her out of my system. Helen was sitting in that classroom when I learned to be ashamed of myself. It was on a Thursday. I was sitting in the back of the room in a seat with a chalk circle drawn around it, the idiot seat, the troublemaker seat. The teacher thought I was stupid. Couldn't spell, couldn't read, couldn't do arithmetic, just stupid. Teachers were never interested in finding out that you couldn't concentrate because you were so hungry, because you hadn't had any breakfast. All you could think about was noontime. Would it ever come? Maybe you could sneak into the cloakroom and steal a bite of some kid's lunch out of a coat pocket. A bite of something. Paste. You can't really make a meal of paste or put it on bread for a sandwich, but sometimes I'd scoop a few spoonfuls out of the paste jar in the back of the room. Pregnant people get strange tastes. I was pregnant with poverty, pregnant with dirt, and pregnant with smells that made people turn away. Pregnant with cold, and pregnant with shoes that were never bought for me. Pregnant with 5 other people in my bed and no daddy in the next room. And pregnant with hunger. Paste doesn't taste too bad when you're hungry. The teacher thought I was a troublemaker. All she saw from the front of the room was a little black boy who squirmed in his idiot seat and made noises and poked the kids around him. I guess she couldn't see a kid who made noises because he wanted someone to know he was there. It was on a Tuesday, the day before the Negro payday. The Eagles always flew on Friday. The teacher was asking each student how much his father would give to the community chest. On Friday night, each kid would get the money from his father, and on Monday he would bring it to the school. I decided I was going to buy me a daddy right then. I had money in my pocket from shining shoes and selling papers, and whatever Helen Tucker pledged for her daddy, I was going to top it. And I'd hand the money right in. I wasn't going to wait until Monday to buy me a daddy. I was shaking, scared to death. The teacher opened her book and started calling out names alphabetically. Helen Tucker? My daddy said he'd give $2.50. That's very nice, Helen. Very, very nice indeed. That made me feel pretty good. It wouldn't take too much to top that. I had almost $3 in dimes and quarters in my pocket. I stuck my hand in my pocket and held on to the money, waiting for her to call my name. But the teacher closed her book after she called everybody else in the class. I stood up and raised my hand. "What is it now? You forgot me." She turned toward the blackboard. "I don't have time to be playing with you, Richard. My daddy said he—" "Sit down, Richard. You're disturbing the class. My daddy said he'd give $15. She turned around and looked mad. "We are collecting this money for you and your kind, Richard Gregory. If your daddy can give $15, you have no business being on relief." "I got it right now. I got it right now. My daddy gave it to me to turn in today. My daddy said—" "And furthermore," she said, looking right at me, her nostrils getting big and her lips getting thin and her eyes opening wide, "we know you don't have a daddy." Helen Tucker turned around, her eyes full of tears. She felt sorry for me. Then I couldn't see her too well because I was crying too. "Sit down, Richard." And I always thought that teacher kind of liked me. She always picked me to wash the blackboard on Friday after school. That was a big thrill. It made me feel important. If I didn't wash it, come Monday the school might not function right. "Where are you going, Richard?" I walked out of school that day, and for a long time I didn't go back very often. There was shame there. Now there was shame everywhere. It seemed like the whole world had been inside that classroom. Everyone had heard what the teacher had said. Everyone had turned around and felt sorry for me. There was shame in going to the Worthy Boys' annual Christmas dinner for you and your kind, because everybody knew what a worthy boy was. Why couldn't they just call it the boys' annual dinner? Why'd they have to give it a name? There was shame in wearing the brown and orange and white plaid mackinaw the welfare gave to 3,000 boys. Why'd it have to be the same for everybody so when you walked down the street the people could see you were on relief? It was a nice warm mackinaw, and it had a hood, and my mama beat me and called me a little rat when she found out I stuffed it in the bottom of a pail full of garbage way over on Cottage Street. There was shame in running over to Mr. Ben's at the end of the day and asking for his rotten peaches. There was shame in asking Mrs. Simmons for a spoonful of sugar. There was shame in running out to meet the relief truck. I hated that truck, full of food for you and your kind. I ran into the house and hid when it came, and then I started to sneak through alleys to take the long way home so the people going into White's Eat Shop wouldn't see me. Yeah, the whole world heard the teacher that day. "We all know you don't have a daddy." It lasted for a while, this kind of numbness. I spent a lot of time feeling sorry for myself, and then one day I met this wino in a restaurant. I'd been out hustling all day, shining shoes, selling newspapers, and I had good gobs of money in my pocket. Bought me a bowl of chili for 15 cents, and a cheeseburger for 15 cents, and a Pepsi for 5 cents, and a piece of chocolate cake for 10 cents. That was a good meal. I was eating when this old wino came in. I love winos because they never hurt anyone but themselves. The old wino sat down at the counter and ordered 26 cents worth of food. He ate it like he really enjoyed it. When the owner, Mr. Williams, asked him to pay the check, the old wino didn't lie or go through his pocket like he suddenly found a hole. He just said, "Don't have no money." The owner yelled, "Why in hell you come in here and eat my food if you don't have no money? That food cost me money." Mr. Williams jumped over the counter and knocked the wino off his stool and beat him over the head with a pop bottle. Then he stepped back and watched the wino bleed. Then he kicked him, and he kicked him again. I looked at the wino with blood all over his face, and I went over. "Leave him alone, Mr. Williams. I'll pay the 26 cents. The wino got up slowly, pulling himself up to the stool, then up to the counter, holding on for a minute until his legs stopped shaking so bad. He looked at me with pure hate. "Keep your 26 cents. You don't have to pay. Not now. I just finished paying for it." He started to walk out, and as he passed me, he reached down and touched my shoulder. "Thanks, Sonny, but it's too late now. Why didn't you pay it before?" I was pretty sick about that. I waited too long to help another man. I remember a white lady who came to our door once around Thanksgiving time. She wore a woolly green bonnet around her head, and she smiled a lot. "Is your mother home, little boy?" "No, she ain't." "May I come in?" "What do you want, ma'am?" She didn't stop smiling once, but she sighed a little when she bent down and lifted up a big yellow basket, the kind I saw around church that were called baskets for the needy. "This is for you." "What's in there?" "All sorts of good things," she said, smiling. "There's candy and potatoes and cake and cranberry sauce and—" she made a funny little face at me by wrinkling up her nose, "and a great big fat turkey for Thanksgiving dinner. Is it cooked?" "A big fat juicy turkey all plucked clean for you." "Is it cooked?" "No, it's not." "We ain't got nothing in the house to cook it with, lady." I slammed the door in her face. Wouldn't that be a bitch, to have a turkey like that in the house with no way to cook it? No gas, no electricity, no coal, just a big fat juicy raw turkey. I remember Mr. Ben, the grocery store man, a round little white man with funny little tufts of white hair on his head and sad looking eyes. His face was kind of a gray colored, and the skin was loose and shook when he talked. "Mama want a loaf of bread, Mr. Ben. Fresh bread." "Right away, Richard," he'd say, and get the bread he brought 3 days old from the bakeries downtown. It was the kind he had for his credit book customers. He dropped it on the counter. Clunk. I'd hand him the credit book, that green tablet with the picture of the snuff can on it, to write down how much we owed him. He licked the tip of that stubby pencil he kept behind his ear. 6 cents. "How do you like school, Richard?" "I like school fine, Mr. Ben." "Good boy, you study, get smart." I'd run home to Mama and tell her that the bread wasn't fresh bread, it was stale bread. She'd flash the big smile. Oh, that Mr. Ben, he knew I was fixing to make toast. The peaches were rotten, and the bread wasn't fresh, and sometimes the butter was green. But when it came down to the nitty-gritty, you could always go to Mr. Ben. Before a Jewish holiday, he'd take all the food that was going to spoil while the store was shut and bring it over to our house. Before Christmas, he'd send over some meat, even though he knew it was going on the tablet and he might never see his money. When the push came to shove and every hungry belly in the house was beginning to eat on itself, Mama could go to Mr. Ben and always get enough for some kind of dinner. But I can remember 3 days in a row I went into Mr. Ben's and asked him to give me a penny, Mr. Goodbar, from the window. 3 days in a row he said, "Out, out, or I'll tell your mama you've been begging." One night I threw a brick through his window and took it. The next day I went into Mr. Ben's to get some bread for Mama, and his skin was shaking, and I heard him tell a lady, "I can't understand why should anybody break my window for a penny piece of candy, a lousy piece of candy. All they got to do is ask."